Welcome to the All Things Wildfire podcast, where we delve into the latest trends and hot topics in protecting properties against wildfire. So sit back, relax, and join us as we arm you against disaster.
Welcome to another podcast with All Things Wildfire. And today we have a guest speaker today, Valkyrie Holmes, who, in just talking to her, I'm kind of like already thinking of some of the things that I want to ask her. So I wanted to start recording before I started to get into all the details. But Valkyrie, why don't you introduce yourself and let the audience know a little bit about what you do and what you're doing now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. First off, thank you for having me on. Been following for a little while now, and so it's great to be on here. My name is Valkyrie Holmes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Faura, and we use climate and property risk analytics to help insurance companies and homeowners reduce their wildfire risk. Started traditionally in data science for space tech companies, and then moved into wildfire as a passion project that was started in school. Worked in wildfire suppression for a while, started a company using drone technology to help firefighters on the front lines, and then pivoted to more of the prevention aspect when we realized that there was a big education gap for homeowners, and we wanted to be able to deliver more tangible value to a ton of different stakeholders in the wildfire fight, because, you know, as you know, and as many people know that are listening, it's not just something that one person or one industry is going to solve, or even one government organization is going to solve. It takes a lot of different moving parts together.
Love it. Love it. Okay. So you're a data scientist. You were intern for SpaceX. How old are you?
I just turned 20.
You just turned 20. I mean, that's legit. That's so cool. I find that very fascinating that at this young age, you're navigating through what, you know, most of us call like the reality of defining where you're going to land in life. And the things that you're doing are, to me, pretty monumental. And so then that's because I'm older, but the reality is I think it's great that you're already on track, and congratulations on really defining for yourself where you want to go now. And the reality is the future might take you somewhere else, but what you're doing now, I got to tell you, I love it. I think it's going to empower you and empower others to really do more for wildfire prevention and helping homeowners to identify the risks around their home. So you're doing something major. I'm proud of you. I love it. You're 20 years old. Congratulations. So how did this happen for you so quick, though, at a young age?
Yeah. So I would say I was a pretty normal kid. And I feel like it's like such a generic thing to say, but I grew up in a family that was very much like an education-centric household. So it was like the Holmes family is an A family. And growing up, I knew that I wanted to do something in science and tech, but really had no desire to be entrepreneurial or be in engineering or anything like that. And then I got into this program called TKS, which is basically just like a high school program to help gear people towards startups and entrepreneurship and business. And at the time, COVID was happening, so I had just a lot of time to think and a lot of time to be with myself and observe the issues in the world. And I hesitate to say that COVID was good for me because it was bad for a lot of people.
Right.
But I think for me, it helped me slow down away from a lot of the kind of muffled nature of growing up being a high schooler. Especially, I grew up in Vegas, born and raised, so there's a lot of things going on all the time. And so during this program, I joined this team to do this hackathon surrounding moonshot technology. So technology that's not available now, but could be in the next 3 to 5 years. And we stumbled upon this research paper about these two graduate students building a vortex cannon-like device out of, I forget what even it was, but it was basically like fighting fires with sound waves.
Yes,
It's like the big
yes,
thing.
I've seen that. Yes.
Yeah. And so we stumbled upon that, thought it was really interesting, and then there was kind of nothing about it after 2015, 2016.
Right.
and we wanted to kind of tackle it, maybe tweak it a bit, figure out what went wrong, and then essentially try to make it happen, because a lot of my teammates were born in Canada, in heavy wildfire country. I have family in California that have been affected by wildfires. My co-founder, her dad's business basically went up in flames because of a wildfire. So very just like heavy relation there. And so we worked on that. And when you first think about wildfire, as an outsider looking in, you're like, oh, okay, like this is a problem. Climate change is making it worse, but we're kind of doing everything we can. But then you start to look into it and you're like, oh, there's hundreds of years of history that have brought us to where we are now and how it's gotten to this point. So I just started getting more and more interested in the repercussions of government and then how we can reverse those effects. And it actually led me down the road of prevention. So
Wow. Okay. And so those guys, those college students that were turning fire off with sound waves,
yeah.
right? That got you thinking about what can you do. And so you started talking about you were working on drone technology too. Like, did you go from discovering the different things that are out there and then started to hop around and figure out what it was for you that you could do, or how did that transition happen for you?
Yeah, I mean, we found that, and then we got interested in the wildfire problem. So we basically just started learning everything there was to know about why suppression was lacking, like what the tech scene was at the time. And this was like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. So fire tech was a thing, but now I think it's much more of like a term that we use,
Right.
which is very cool to be in the space. And so we were learning everything there was to know about wildfire, and then got in contact with one of the companies that was actually working with the two after they graduated to try to develop something similar. And we just got like a lot of really good information from them, ended up working with them to try to pilot this technology. And it was just a lot of talking to people. I think like LinkedIn outreach has been my saving grace to learn a lot about this. So
did that ever turn into anything, or what happened with that?
Yeah, so we started a company. It was called Project Firefly, that was basically aimed at making this a reality. We were working with another company called Evo EMS that we were basically like working to pilot with them, and do like outreach and kind of grow what this could be. And then we basically like ran into some issues with the actual like piloting, and it ended up not working. And I don't know if I'm really allowed to talk about it too much. But
no, you're good. You're good. I think
it's basically
what intrigued me was you were working with drone technology too. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Basically, it was essentially, okay, we know that something like a cannon, like a vortex cannon-esque object, like the cannon they were using with the two graduate students was less of a vortex cannon and more of like a sound cannon.
Right.
So it used different mechanics. But we knew that a cannon like that could be something that we could use on the front lines of wildfire to help containment, just because if you're taking rings of air that are collapsing in on itself, kind of like when you see a dolphin blow a ring of air underwater, it's kind of like that. When you take that and that air is constantly sucking in the atmosphere around it, it essentially makes it so that it rips the fuel off of the fuel base of the fire, and that's how it extinguishes it. So we knew that that was an application for wildfire. We knew that firefighters were using very rudimentary methods on the front lines that were putting a lot of people in danger. And so equipping them on drones allowed us to get closer into the fire. It allowed us to keep people out of harm's way. And it also allowed us to mobilize somewhat of a fleet of drone technology that we could use to further containment.
I love that. I think that is absolutely part of the future, in looking forward to seeing these fireflies of drones just taking off into into the wildland and just turning off extinguishing the fire. So excited about what that could look like. So Valkyrie, let's talk about what you are doing now. You're the CEO of Faura, Faura. Okay.
Mhm.
And so what specifically are you providing to homeowners and insurance carriers with this business and this startup that you have?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we realized pretty quickly that the landscape for catastrophic risk and what we're seeing with traditional carriers pulling out of states like California because of that cat risk, and there's a bunch of different factors, but we can just focus on that, is purely because we don't have a lot of that information to be able to make accurate decisions about properties. And we saw initially that there's a lot of companies that do work in modeling climate risk. So there's companies that will basically say, hey, with a given neighborhood, with a given plot of land, this is how a wildfire were to come through this area if it would happen in the next 6 months to a year. So it's modeling what a wildfire would look like through the area based on topography, humidity, like structural density of the homes, things like that. And we found that there was a piece missing in that equation, which was, okay, if a wildfire were to come through, how many of these homes would actually survive? And so that's what our technology is focused on. It's the prevention aspect. How do we incentivize risk reduction, and how does that play into the greater loss ratio of these pieces? So preventing total losses is the major value proposition, I would say. But we work with insurance companies to give them that data via a digital assessment that homeowners run through. Sometimes it's via agent, sometimes it's via the carrier themselves. But once we collect that inspection level data of the home, we calculate a resilience score for the homeowner and for the insurance carrier that helps them better determine how to balance their risk portfolio. And for the homeowners, we give them action items and incentives to help them reduce their risk, which then translates usually into a lower premium. So the biggest thing that I saw when I was initially looking into the space was, okay, we have all these stakeholders and homeowners want to get tangible value. And there's a lot of things that exist right now that give them a certificate or give them some kind of like a list of action items. They take a test, they get action items, they can reduce them. But there's not a lot that ties it to something that they're used to getting that's not an additional cost to them. So like we liken it to solar panels, right? Like 25% of people are going to be buying solar panels because they're more environmentally beneficial. But the overwhelming 65+% of people are going to be buying solar panels because they can see a direct translation in their energy bill when they switch to electric. So it's about how do we find that tangible value that can link homeowners to actually taking these steps to reduce their risk, and that in our opinion is tying it to insurance, which is now a big issue in places like California with wildfire.
Absolutely. So are you seeing, Valkyrie, that the carriers are doing one of two things? Number one, because they are requiring homeowners to take more of risk mitigation ownership of their properties. And so do you see carriers renewing policyholders because of the work they're doing? And are you seeing insurance carriers reduce any rates based on the work that they do? Are you seeing that firsthand?
Yeah, so we're mostly seeing, we haven't gotten to the stage where we're getting renewals in like kind of a cycle, but we're seeing that policies that would have otherwise been thrown out because they're strictly in a zone that's classified as high risk are now being considered because we have extra information about how that risk plays into how to survive. And then we also see lower premiums, kind of like you said, of okay, if you've done a combination of factors of risk mitigation tactics on your home, this results in a relatively decent risk reduction, which means we can charge you less. And I think that'll be the case moving forward. Renewals will be more of a wait and see, I think, from what we've been seeing. But yeah, initially it serves as like another barrier to entry for people that might want to do that work on their home to be reconsidered for insurance, etc.
Yeah. And I think that's what most homeowners are really asking for. Like, they're asking for the guarantee. If I were to do these things, how am I guaranteed that, I'm still going to get a decent premium on my policy? And it's a fair question, absolutely. Yeah. I think most of the carriers are just in a place where they need to see people making the investment so they can at least begin to put them in this pool of potential groups of homes that they can actually insure. So now, Valkyrie, what are a couple of the things that you know firsthand are some of the most critical things that a homeowner should do around their property to prevent wildfire risk?
Yeah. So we kind of section it into different areas of the home based on structure. So we section it by the roof, by foundation, by siding, and then just general vegetation. So the biggest thing that insurance companies usually care about is anything to do with the roof. So if you have missing shingles, if it's not metal, if you have gutters that aren't properly secured, or the biggest thing probably for wildfire specifically is just vegetation on your roof and in your gutters. We hear that all the time, and that is a big issue because it just makes it 10 times more likely that your house is going to burn down and catch. So that's probably the biggest thing. The thing that I always love to mention is putting grating on your ventilation and on your chimney. That fact blew my mind, that idea that an ember can fly into your chimney and burn your house from the inside out. That is always just something that I think as a homeowner, we don't really think too much about the chimney as much. We don't think about the ventilation on the outside of our house, but it is a real factor that we've seen has destroyed homes and resulted in total losses. So we section it by roof. Those are probably the biggest things. Also, any overhanging structures and overhanging vegetation over the roof or casitas, outhouses, things like that. That leads me to vegetation in general. So pruning trees, making sure that they're limbed up at least 6 feet, I think is the recommended. Things like keeping your grass trimmed, making sure there's no logs or extra vegetation against the home. So like a lot of people have plant beds, they have little like herb gardens and things like that. Very very flammable plants, any plant that has saps or gums in them that could basically be just like explosive fire bombs on your property if they catch on fire. So things like that in terms of vegetation is just making sure there's nothing overhanging the house that could fall on the house and spread embers that way. And there's also limiting spread. So making sure everything that could potentially catch on fire is on just dirt instead of something that could catch. And then siding, we always mention logs against the side of the house. It's a big thing out in the California countryside. And it is a pain to have it somewhere that's other than that, but it could mean the difference between your house just being kindling for the fire. So logs against the house, making sure you're reinforcing your siding, making sure your windows are impact resistant, fire resistant. And then anything to do with the foundation is mostly if an ember can get under your house, it can burn your house from the inside out. So if you have an open deck, enclosing that or reinforcing things with metal, making sure vegetation under your deck is cleared out, and like on your porch and things like that. And I could probably rattle on about 50 more things, honestly, just off the top of my head. But those are probably, in terms of the ones that stand out to me that reduce your risk by the most percentage, those are what I would say.
Absolutely. And we had it was called the coastal fire in the Orange County area in California a couple of years ago, and a hillside caught fire. And what was so interesting was that a couple of streets down, homes were igniting, and it wasn't, the flames were not going from one home to the other. It was skipping homes, and then all of a sudden you have this home that's ignited out of nowhere, and it's burning from the attic. And it happened to be because the vents, right, the ventilation that was open for the attic, the embers were just flying through there and igniting homes. And so that was that was scary to see, but also very sobering to really understand that, like the work that IBHS has done, for example. They've done a lot of this ember testing, and you're able to see it firsthand on really what's taking place and what's happening with ignition sources around these homes. And going back to what you said about if an ember can get underneath your home, a lot of people, especially here on the West Coast, we have homes that are stucco, and we have what's called this weak screed but there are some times where underneath it, there's still exposure. And so I know about this one home where the embers got underneath the weep screed and no one knew what was going on. Everything looked fine. And it was days later, after the fire had already passed through, that these embers got underneath and they ignited some of the floor joists. And man, all they saw was little bits of smoke coming out, and they didn't know what it was until they got underneath the home. And it really could have taken the entire home down. So I think the entire building envelope, we have to really be concerned about. These embers are flying at a speed of 20, 30 miles an hour, right? I mean, and they're bumping into your home and they're falling down, and they're trying to penetrate any openings that you have. So I think the education for homeowners is really like the biggest push. And this is part of what we're about, is trying to get messages out to homeowners, because a lot of us, I don't know how you feel. I know you're in New York now, but you just left California, right? And I don't know what your thoughts are about, when you're talking to people about wildfire, are they really putting themselves in those shoes of, understanding that a wildfire could impact them? Or do they still think, oh, that's other people that deal with wildfire? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of the cognitive dissonance that you feel when it's winter. There's not much happening in terms of wildfire. There's also there's this argument of, oh, we got a lot of rain this year, so the wildfire season is going to be bad. But then that means that plants are going, so there's more fuel for the fire if a fire does happen. So it's all of these, I think, still common misconceptions about what ties into a wildfire season that aren't going to go away unless we tie them with something that gives people a reason to care. And it's not just giving people a reason to care, it's about tying it to something that everyone relies on. So like part of the push for us towards insurance is you need insurance to have a house in the majority of places in the US. You need a mortgage to be able to afford these things. For a lot of real estate agents, they need to be able to sell homes, and homes need retrofits to be able to sell in a lot of these countries. There's all these like different stakeholders that drive value from things that homeowners rely on, and homeowners are bearing the brunt of responsibility, cost, and damages if a wildfire is to come through. But again, it's always this concept of, oh, like it's not going to happen to me, when in reality it's just a matter of time in a lot of cases. So from what I've seen, I think I agree with you that education is the biggest piece, but I think education needs to be tied into something that we rely on and something that we don't really need to push too heavily on to incentivize. Like everyone needs insurance, we know that. So if we make it easier for people to get insurance, or we make it easier for people to afford insurance, that's directly incentivizing us to do this work on our property and promote resilience. And we've seen a lot of that hyper variability, that hyper personalization with products, with consumer goods, with even insurance policies like auto insurance, life insurance. All of that now is being customized to how safe you drive, how well you exercise, how good you eat, all these things. And it's kind of just something that we have to start tweaking to regular home insurance, because now our risk is changing and climate isn't going to change overnight.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I think when you talk about auto, right? They have these chips you stick in your car, like, hey, safe driver, right? It's a matter of time before that has to happen with homes also, to really understand that we are doing our part to be as safe as possible, so we can reduce the risk of the carriers, so we can make insurance affordable. Because to your point, it's a necessary evil. There's no question. Like it is part of our ecosystem. We cannot live without it. One of the bigger concerns in talking to some of the previous guests, and I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but in California, it's called the California Fair Plan. which is the insurance of last resort, so they call it. And it was made, it was created years and years ago to be kind of this fail-safe and kind of catch-all for like the uninsurable home or properties. Except now it's grown tremendously. And the scary thing is that, you know, there are so many people now on the FAIR plan, and there are so many limitations on policy coverage. So if there is a claim, it's much different than having a basic insurance policy. There's a lot of clauses in here that may not allow you the same benefits. And do you have any experience or any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so a couple things. I want to bring this new kind of like language to insurance, and it's not new. Like, I'm not creating a new method of talking about it, but I think a lot of the time we as consumers, as homeowners, as people that deal with government entities a lot of the time, or heavily regulated industries like insurance, forget that insurance literally allows us to live as carefree as we want for the majority of cases. Like everything, even the device that we're calling on, LinkedIn that probably people are watching clips on, the devices you have, the houses you live in, the cars you drive, the hospitals you stay in, everything, even though insurance is a pain, it underlies a certain level of comfort that countries, like especially in Latin America where insurance isn't really like a regulated thing that is instilled in everyone right when you're born, basically, it's something that allows us to live with a level of comfort that, because it's underlying everything, we forget a lot of the time. And so this idea that like insurance is a necessary evil now, I think, is painted in the media as insurance companies are pulling out, they don't want us to have insurance, they're leaving us in the dust, when in reality it's, dang, like we held on for as long as we possibly could, and now we just need solutions. Now we need information to be able to make the right decisions for everyone else so that we can stay afloat, so that we can continue giving you guys the level of comfort that you need. So I want to like put that out there as like
I love that.
something that I want to hear more from people, just because I know me, like I hear a lot about people that kind of like fall into insurance. Like, it's like I was a lawyer before and then I went into insurance and now I love it, and I felt, and the majority of people don't go to college for insurance. And there's a reason for that, because you can kind of just be in any industry and fall into insurance because it underlines every single industry, you know? So that being said, with the California Fair Plan, and we're seeing this with Citizens Insurance too in Florida with their last resort plan, I do think it's an issue that it's a fairly uncomprehensive policy for the amount that you pay, and it being the last resort is overloading the system. That being said, I do think that there are more ENS and kind of like surplus specialty solutions that will enter the market as a result of traditional carriers leaving. That's kind of what we've seen with Florida, where now they're getting a lot more specialized. We're seeing that with a lot of parametric options too,
Yes.
where you pay and it pays out in the event of a wildfire if you're touched at all, no questions asked. And as those solutions become more widespread, I think it'll be more in the favor of, okay, how can we make this more personalized to you as the homeowner, as opposed to just giving a blanket policy that traditionally we've seen for homeowners policies where it's not very customizable. The risk is the same. You get a blanket X, Y, and Z. This covers these perils kind of policy. When that will happen, I think it's already happening, but when it will take into full effect, probably in the next couple of years. But it will definitely be interesting getting people off of the FAIR plan. I know there's like ZCAI, they're trying to get people off the FAIR plan, and people, as they come up with these solutions, will try to relieve that system. But yeah, we might get into the same kind of like Citizens Florida insurance scenario where we're now, yeah, we now just need to get more specialty policies.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think more of the non-admitted carriers are going to be coming into the market with some really unique solutions, we hope, to be able to offer people more options, yeah, and this entire landscape of insurance and wildfire is so intriguing. And I hesitate to say that insurance premiums are going up because of wildfire. It's all the disasters that are taking place, right? It's unprecedented what's been happening. Wildfire is just one of the pieces that just adds to the complexity and to the lack of profit that they have to make. But so interesting, and I hope that in the next, like you're saying, in the next couple of years, we have some real new answers or possibilities or options for homeowners. Because right now, there's another lady that we're going to be interviewing. She's from San Diego, and her rates went up 7 times, and she's on a fixed income and she doesn't know what to do. And these types of things are, they start to hit home in a different way, and really, some of these people really need some new options on what they can do versus, not being able to budget now what they used to budget in the past. Again, all that to say that California actually has had some of the lowest rates ever, right? We've just been spoiled with paying the least amount possible. And now California is catching up and everyone's screaming. But the reality is, nationwide, it's still, some of the lowest rates around. So, Valkyrie, thank you for joining us. Is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with? Any message from you, the 20-year-old, who's going to be doing some really cool stuff in her life? I think we're all going to be cheering for you in whatever you do. But is there any message that you want to leave with the audience today?
I would say the biggest thing is we need to be more educated about our risk and more educated about how to encourage others to take steps. That's something that I think we're still struggling with as an industry in wildfire, in just general catastrophe. And so the biggest thing is if you can encourage other people to get better premiums by doing X, Y, and Z, or you can help protect your neighborhood, help out. I worked with a lot of like Firewise communities that really do make just such a great effort in getting the community get together and organizing chipping days and things like that. The biggest thing is education, and we need to be able to both give people the information that they need and then also make sure that that's packaged in a way that other people can take it along and teach other people. So I hope that starts to become more of the norm, and happy to lead that charge.
That's awesome. And you're right. I think we can't keep this information to ourselves. Those of us that are doing something about our home, we really need to go out to our neighborhoods and say, hey guys, here's what I'm doing. Here's why I'm doing it. What do you think? And I feel safer because of X, and really kind of getting it out to your point, to your neighbors, to your neighborhood, to your community, because keeping it to ourselves is somewhat selfish, right? Like, cool, I've got my insurance rate, I'm good. Neighbors, I don't care about you, or I don't want to talk about it. But the reality is, the neighbors really can make you more vulnerable too if we're not increasing their knowledge and making them more fire wise and making their homes more fire resilient. So it really is something that we need to spread like the gospel. That's what needs to happen. Spread it as much as we can. Valkyrie, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to whatever you have going on in addition to Faura in your future endeavors, and keep us in mind. Maybe we'll get you on in a couple of years and see what you're doing.
Absolutely. Hopefully we've solved the wildfire problem and everything is peachy and we can work on something else.
I love it. Thank you, girl.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode of All Things Wildfire. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to our show and follow us on social media to stay up to date on all things wildfire. And as always, thanks for listening.